Hi there! My name is Emmy Speens, and today I'd like to take you on a journey with me back into Westeros. I'm so excited! I know, okay, so obviously I hated the last couple seasons of the Game of Thrones series, just like everyone else did, but it's time to move on. We're gonna try to have fun here today. I haven't read any of the books. I have not read any spoilers for House of the Dragon beyond what's already present and known in the Game of Thrones series at large, and I've forgotten most of that, so you can trust me. I'm your host, the Mid-B, Emmy Speens. I just want to say, in this video, you're going to see me make some comments about Matt Smith's wig. And obviously, I don't have any room to talk, but I also don't have an HBO budget, and this cost me $50. So, I don't know. Like, should I be on camera? I don't know. Maybe I'm just like a natural Targaryen. I don't know. Yeah, I promise it won't always be like this, but I can't promise it'll be better. Anyway, let's get started. House of the Dragon opens in the year 101 in Westeros, during a golden age under the King Jaehaerys Targaryen I. King Jaehaerys' two sons died before him, so the king calls a great council of Westerosi lords to choose his successor. The two obvious contenders to the Iron Throne are Rhaenys Targaryen, the daughter of Jaehaerys' eldest son, and Viserys Targaryen, the son of Jaehaerys' younger son. The lords of Westeros elect Viserys to succeed his grandfather Jaehaerys to the Iron Throne. It seems obvious that the lords of Westeros would choose a male descendant to succeed, considering Westerosi traditions, but Jaehaerys knows that the decision is not that simple. Jaehaerys knows that the greatest threat to the House of the Dragon and its rule is the House of the Dragon itself. We then pivot to King's Landing and skip ahead 9 years into King Viserys' reign. This is 172 years before the events of the Game of Thrones show. Princess Rhaenyra soars in on her dragon, Syrax. Rhaenyra then tries to coax her lady-in-waiting, Lady Allison Hightower, daughter of Hand of the King, to take a little joyride on Syrax with her. But Lady Allison politely refuses. She's good on the ground, thank you. Rhaenyra and Allison then pay a visit to Queen Aemma, Princess Rhaenyra's mother. Queen Aemma is in a really pregnant state, and she's not having a good time. Not only is she on the verge of popping, but she has a history of troublesome pregnancies, so nobody's super jazzed for this one except the king. Rhaenyra laments the state of her mother's poor health and gives a yuck face at the idea that one day she'll have children of her own. Ooh. But Queen Aemma pushes back gently against this and says that the childbirthing bed, that's the lady's battlefield. This discomfort, she says, is how we serve the realm. Rhaenyra is then late to the small council meeting where she serves as cupbearer at her father's behest. At the small council meeting in question, King Viserys is in the midst of telling an awesome story about butts when he's so rudely interrupted by Master of Ships Lord Corlys. Lord Corlys Velaryon warns that the Free Cities have formed an alliance called the Triarchy. The Triarchy are trying to claim the Stepstones, a group of islands west of Dorne, currently overrun by pirates, and the Triarchy has been slowly wiping those pirates out. Lord Corlys suggests, should the Triarchy be successful, it could compromise Westerosi ports and trade at large. Lord Corlys is really hype about the problem, but he is the only one. Just a side note, Lord Corlys Velaryon is Rhaenys Targaryen's husband. If you recall, King Jaehaerys' granddaughter, who was passed over in favor of Viserys for the Iron Throne. That may be why everyone at the council is pretty reticent about taking his suggestions. It's not necessarily that he's wrong all the time, he's just on the wrong side. The king goes so far as to suggest that they ought to be glad to be rid of the pirate problem at the Triarchy's expense. When Lord Corlys objects to this, the Hand of the King, Sir Otto Hightower, Lady Allison's father, pushes firmly back against Corlys and redirects to whatever the king fancies to talk about next. And the king fancies to talk about the tourney next. He's so excited for this tourney. It's kind of ridiculous, and everyone else is like really embarrassed for him because the tourney is in celebration of his son who has not been born yet. Immediately, Master of Coin Lord Beesbury tries to pivot this conversation to lament the amount of money they've already spent on the City Watch at the behest of Prince Damon Targaryen, newly appointed the head of the city watch by his brother, King Viserys. King Viserys is like really pro Damon, his brother, and he won't hear a lick about it. He also won't hear about the scientific fact Grand Maester Mello tries to impart upon him that you cannot reliably predict the sex of a child. But honestly, Lord Viserys like objects to this, and he's like so sure that he's gonna have a son, and he says it with the kind of certainty that horoscope girlies speak, in the sense that like, I don't know my birth chart, but they do. Like, I trust them. Then Lord Corlys refuses wine at the meeting in a very like pointed show. Rhaenyra and her Kingsguard, Sir Harold, then head to the Great Hall. Sir Harold informs the princess that her uncle, Prince Damon, is waiting therein. She asks if her father, King Viserys, knows of his brother's arrival. Sir Harold says no, to which Rhaenyra replies, good? Like, I don't know why she's like pro-family discord at this juncture. We meet Damon and Matt Smith, the actor's horrible wig that we're supposed to believe is his hair, and interestingly, nobody has mentioned the material damages I'm entitled to for having witnessed that atrocity, but I guess I'll just have to settle with all of you having witnessed my atrocity. Ha! We do see the new badass iteration of the Iron Throne in this scene too. It's appropriately spiky and foreboding this time around. It's super cool. Not good for sitting, but otherwise. Damon is waiting on the Iron Throne, which Sir Harold pegs as a sign of disrespect, and probably rightfully so, but Rhaenyra isn't as concerned. They discuss his execution for this treason and High Valyrian, which amuses Damon greatly. Damon gives his niece a necklace made of Valyrian steel, the same type of steel his famous sword, Dark Sister, is made of, and he says that he does this so they can each have a piece of their shared ancestry. Cute. Allison and Rhaenyra have an adorable moment in the Godswood studying. Rhaenyra's lack of anxiety about her future worries Lady Allison, whose fate is very closely tied to Princess Rhaenyra's as her lady. But, you know, girls, they peck and they fight and then they walk it off and they're sisters again, and I love them. Meanwhile, Grand Maester Mello is attending to a wound King Viserys sustained while sitting atop the Iron Throne. It's like spiky, like I mentioned, and it's very foreboding and just like not great for sitting. So now the wound is ooey gooey and nobody knows how to treat it. It's very symbolic. It's very cool. So Sir Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King, and the Maester agree that they will keep this information under wraps because a wounded king who's getting worse with no determined heir? That's not good. That's not good. That's not good. After brushing off the concerns of his maesters, Viserys visits Aemma in a tepid bath and bothers the poor dear with more like visions and predictions about his future son, which isn't born yet. He knows it will be a boy, he's just sure of it. He saw it in a dream. Aemma kind of demurs at this and insists that like, boy or girl, she will not try again for another child. She has lost 5 children in twice as many years, and she cannot bear to lose another. We get this really neat murder porn scene next that we really didn't need. It could have just easily been like a line of dialogue or two, something to add to Damon's mystique, but instead we just see him maiming and dismembering criminals throughout King's Landing and the city streets. Cool. The next day, Sir Otto lectures the king about his brother's wanton disregard for law and order as head of the city watch. He says it's a vicious abuse of power, and then at the small council meeting following, Damon and Sir Otto trade barbs at the expense of everyone else in the room. It's very much like your coworkers are arguing about something that like only they care about, but they're gonna get everyone else involved vibes. There's a little moment with Lord Strong, the beefy master of laws, who Damon addresses directly. It's clear that Lord Strong isn't used to getting a word in edgewise at all in this council, so when he starts to speak, you can see he's choosing his words carefully, and then he's interrupted. Sir Otto just cannot help himself. He's like, he cannot. Sir Otto rightfully starts dunking on Damon's executions in the public city streets as unlawful and really like bad for their image. Damon points out though that like small folk don't come to do business in King's Landing because they view the city as lawless and dangerous. Lord Corlys agrees that this is not a good look, and King's Landing ought to be a bastion for law and order, not the opposite. But is Damon accomplishing that? I don't know. Then that sore loser, Sir Otto, oh my god, this petty bitch. He tries to dig at Damon's marriage, but Damon doesn't bite. He refers to his wife as the bronze bitch, who probably prefers his absence anyway, and then helpfully offers her up to Sir Otto Hightower, who himself recently lost his wife. Oh God. Sir Otto stands like he's gonna fucking do shit, and of course he doesn't. Like, the king stops him, but it's kind of like, okay, that's cute, but like, even Damon is like, dude, I just like dismembered 3 guys in public and jacked off after. Like, what is Sir Otto gonna do? You know what I mean? Even when Damon leaves, King Viserys stays caping for his brother. It's kind of sweet, even though it's like so dumb. Then we're treated to Damon, unable to properly bone his mistress. Oh no, because of all the stress he's going through. He's just like going through a hard time. But his mistress is so sweet, and they just end up cuddling. And you know, I know this is like a departure, but I'm glad they're together. I'm glad. They're sweet, and sometimes you do just need a cuddle. Like, sometimes you... Then the heirs tourney begins, a tournament celebrating the heir to the kingdom who doesn't exist yet. We get another little moment of tenderness between Viserys and his daughter, Princess Rhaenyra. And then Viserys announces that Queen Emma has gone into labor, which is weird because this tournament, like, that's what it... Anyway, we're formally introduced to Queen Viserys' cousin, Rhaenys Targaryen, referred to as the queen who never was by a lesser Stormlands house. She attends the tourney with her husband, Lord Corlys, and their 2 children. Sir Otto remarks to King Viserys that the king might have the participants' tongue for suggesting that Rhaenys might be the rightful heir to the throne. Remember, she was passed over for Viserys. But Viserys, a man very much without ego, points out that tongues cannot change the line of succession alone, so they might as well let them wag. But the tittering look Rhaenys and Lord Corlys share after the remark belie that there's a little more than just tongue wagging going on here. Rhaenyra and Allison shared the hot goss of all the ladies and lords at the tournament, as men are maimed emotionally and physically in front of them. You know, as you do. Sir Harold joins the fray of gossip with a little tidbit about Criston Cole, a mysterious contender that intrigues Rhaenyra, as he unseated 2 experienced Baratheon knights. Then Damon gets first pick of tourney opponents because he's a spoiled brat, and of course he goes for Sir Otto Hightower's son, Sir Gawain Hightower. Yeah, it's not good. Damon is kind of the worst here. He takes out Sir Gawain's horse after he can't get the better of him the old-fashioned way. I'm not like a legal scholar on jousting, but that feels illegal, right? But nobody calls him out on it, obviously. And Rhaenyra goes to congratulate him for basically like maiming her best friend's brother. And then just for a little icing on the fuck you cake Damon is baking, he asks for Lady Allison's favor, her brother. Oh, okay. Anyway, then the king's hand delivers a message that King Viserys is needed in Queen Emma's chambers. The baby is in breach, and the Grand Maester informs the king, at this juncture, both will die. Or they can try an experimental technique from the Citadel, that is, where maesters are trained, that might save the child, but regardless, Emma is going to die from the blood loss. Meanwhile, Rhaenys and her husband Corlys discuss the extremity of the violence at the tournament. Rhaenys says that all these knights are too green and full of seed, and that's why they're raging, because they've never seen war and they haven't, you know. Everyone is horrified at the extreme violence on display at the tourney, but no one is as disturbed as Lady Allison. Though she sits tall and proud as a lady should, you can see she's picking her fingernails bloody. She is going to town. Also, like, just for like the risk of infection in this day and age, I wish someone would stop her. It's giving me like, ah. Images of Queen Emma's birthing chambers, her battlefield, and the violence on the battlefield of the tournament are interspersed. There's this horrifying sequence in which we watch Queen Emma come to understand in time with her the decision King Viserys has had to make. He tries to soften the blow, but even Viserys' big doe eyes cannot distract from the gut-wrenching terror of Queen Emma's screams. Damon eats it really bad during his next joust with Criston Cole. He's a big baby about it and insists they finish the match on foot. We pivot back to the baby. It's born. Its name is Balon. Emma, unfortunately, has passed. Back to Damon. He's forced to yield. Criston Cole beat the shit out of him, and he storms off, a big old baby. Then Criston Cole turns around and reveals himself to be Dornish as he asks for Princess Rhaenyra's favor. Ah! At Queen Emma's funeral, we learn that the baby, Balon, has died as well. Rhaenyra expresses resentment concerning her father's longing for a boy to Damon, hoping Viserys found joy in those sweet few hours as a father to a son, finally. Damon gently insists that it is Rhaenyra's duty to progress the funeral and support her father. She needs to be strong now where her father cannot, and he cannot. Rhaenyra then commands Syrax to set her mother and brother's funeral pyre ablaze. At the next council, Sir Otto helpfully suggests that they begin organizing succession for the realm. King Viserys is stirred from his near catatonic grief when it is suggested that Damon is untrustworthy or too unpredictable to name as Viserys' successor. Sir Otto suggests Rhaenyra in turn, but Lord Strong, the master of laws, says that naming a girl heir contradicts their stated purpose of keeping stability within the realm. Viserys insists he would not be made to choose between his daughter and his brother anyway. Then Corlys helpfully suggests his wife, Rhaenys Targaryen. At this, all breaks out into chaos until Viserys just starts calling the small council crows that would feast on the corpses of his child and wife. And then he leaves. In Sir Otto's chambers, Sir Otto sends an urgent raven to Old Town, his lordship if you remember, and embraces his tearful daughter, Lady Allison, who is likely upset both over the loss of the queen and her brother's maiming, I would assume. Sir Otto affords his daughter but a second to be tearful before he begins sniffing around the royal family's affairs once again. Allison knows the routine. She knows when it's her turn to ask after the king, and that's when Sir Otto reveals the reason he called his daughter to his chambers in the first place. He tells her that the king needs her. The king is low, and the king needs cheering up. He thinks Lady Allison is just the person to do that. He says that his daughter should pay the king a visit, and that she should wear one of her late mother's dresses when she does so. Yikes. But Allison, reticent as she is a good daughter and a better lady. And so she shows up at the king's bedchambers in her mother's dress, history book in hand. He's working on like a carving. I don't know if he's just too stuck in his grief to realize what's happening or if he's just too sad to care, but he's gotta know what she's up to, you know, having been king and a prince this long, right? He doesn't seem receptive at first until she kind of like puts the book aside and starts expressing how she felt after her mother died. She says that she wished someone had just talked to her like a human, that people would stop speaking to her in riddles about her grief, and then she just looks at the king and she just tells him that she's sorry that this happened to him. She wishes someone had said it to her, that they were just sorry, and she's sorry that it happened to him. You just see Viserys collapse like a marionette with like his strings cut. That broke something in him. Damon and Lord Strong, meanwhile, are at a local brothel. Damon doesn't seem particularly festive, but the usually demure Lord Strong is like super drunk, and he drunkenly commands the crowd to quiet down so Damon can make a speech as presumptive heir to the Iron Throne. Damon wasn't really feeling the party beforehand, but he can't resist a call to action like that. Obviously broody and moody. It's obviously a way of processing his grief. We can see that he's just playing a character and he can't seem to pull himself out of it. But he leans into the speech with his usual lack of reverence and refers to his late nephew as heir for a day. Really not good taste. Dead baby jokes weren't even cool back then. You know what I mean? Rhaenyra and King Viserys learn that he said this at the next small council meeting because Sir Otto had spies in the brothel following Damon, of course. And aside from being an extremely poor taste, it's also very conveniently treason. Rhaenyra is hurt by this, clearly. Why wouldn't she be? But Viserys' pain is like next level. He is devastated. Instead of calling Damon to the council, he calls Damon to the Iron Throne, where we see King Viserys on the throne for the first time, like looking like a king for the first time. And Damon, in turn, is made to like behave as like a docile subject for the first time. Damon like tepidly defends himself and then tries to like deflect in that way, like when you know you've done something bad. Damon accuses Viserys of wanting to send him away at every turn, but Viserys points out he was Damon's only friend. And Damon admits that he does resent Viserys for not asking him to be Viserys' hand. When Viserys asks why on earth he would do that with Damon's behavior, Damon immediately replies, "Because I'm your brother." This cuts Viserys deep because like, that's why he loves you and capes for you all the time, Damon, because you're his brother. He admits his true feelings concerning Sir Otto, that the man, Sir Otto, is a second son destined to inherit nothing that he doesn't take directly from the king. And if Damon had stopped there, things might have panned out very differently for the Targaryens and Westeros as a whole. But Damon didn't stop there. He couldn't help himself. He finally tapped the nerve that no one else could in Viserys. Damon tells the king that he's weak, that Viserys needs to be protected from the small council, who are all leeches, that see his weakness. The king immediately revokes Damon's right to succession, right then and there. And Damon's like, no, you can't do that. King's like, watch me, and he does. He commands Damon to return to his lady wife at the Vale. And when Damon moves to approach the Iron Throne, like, Viserys is like serious with his Kingsguard. He's like, you will fucking not. And then they kind of like wait, like there's this moment where like Viserys waits. If Damon apologized, you kind of know Viserys would soften. Viserys is a family man, but Damon just demurs with an uncharacteristic "Your Grace" and takes his leave. We see Viserys recognize something has changed between them, and then he cuts himself on the Iron Throne by accident again. Whoops. King Viserys summons Princess Rhaenyra to Valyrian's shrine beneath the Red Keep. He asks her what she sees when she looks at dragons, and Rhaenyra replies that she sees the Targaryen family. She sees them. She says that the only thing that separates them from the rest of the world are their dragons. Viserys likes this answer, elaborating that the idea that they can control dragons is just an illusion, and it's one that brought Valyria its doom. He says that any Targaryen must understand this before they are king or queen. This is when Rhaenyra recognizes why her father called her to the Shrine of Valyrian. What's happening now? She is being named as heir to the throne of Westeros. But more importantly to Rhaenyra, he apologizes for wasting their time together, wishing for a son. A procession of lords then bend the knee to Rhaenyra as heir to the Iron Throne. King Viserys describes over voiceover the challenges that lie ahead for Rhaenyra, that this is a curse, not a blessing, and he's right. Nobody looks particularly pleased about it, least of all Lady Allison or Rhaenyra herself. Beneath the keep, Viserys tells Rhaenyra that Aegon the Conqueror, their ancestor that came to Westeros before them, was not motivated simply by ambition in his conquest. Aegon dreamt of a terrible winter that would consume the world of the living if the Targaryens did not unite man behind them. Aegon called this vision the Song of Ice and Fire. That's the book name! King Viserys says that Aegon's Song of Ice and Fire has been passed down to each Targaryen heir so that they would be prepared if the cold night ever did descend upon them. But in lieu of pleading fealty, we see Damon mount his dragon with his mistress. And the final shot is Rhaenyra, scared, apprehensive, and excited. And that's The House of the Dragon, Episode 1. Allison and Rhaenyra's dynamic feels very real to me. The way they navigate the world down to their outfits, because you can see Rhaenyra wants to take advantage of their youth to the fullest extent and their privilege before her battlefield calls. Allison is anxious to get stable. Like, she's anxious to grow into her duties and find a stable place for the rest of her life. She takes her studies seriously and does not question authority figures, even her initial line politely insisting that she would prefer to stay grounded when Rhaenyra asks if she wants to take a joyride on Syrax. That demonstrates just how different they are right off the bat. But of course, Rhaenyra, as a princess and a dragon rider, doesn't have the same sort of urgent concerns a lady-in-waiting like Allison might. Even as daughter to Hand of the King, Otto Hightower is still a second son. Her place in court is as insecure as Viserys' plan of succession. Roasted! Yeah, got him. Allison particularly is a striking figure as she moves around the castle, though. You can see that she's just apart from everyone, even in her colors. Despite how demure she is in personality, her bright blue clothes and her wispy hair as she twirls about the castle on Rhaenyra's stiff arm, they complement one another so well. But next to a strong figure like Rhaenyra, who really is like the epitome of a Targaryen, it would be easy for someone like Allison to fade into the background, and she just doesn't. She commands the room, and the fact that she doesn't speaks to the inner strength of the character, as well as the person playing her, as well as the actress playing her. Young Allison is incredible. I'd rather serve the realm as a knight. Rhaenyra with this girl boss narrative, like, I know the Targaryens are like, this is what they're kind of like, their gender dynamics are different than the rest of Westeros, and they view Targaryen women as above like the rest of man, you know, but still, it's still like, I just hope this doesn't turn into like a girl bossing kind of fucking narrative, you know what I mean? Like, I cannot do another Daenerys Targaryen. In an interview with the official House of the Dragon Companion podcast, showrunner Ryan Condal remarked that exploring the various iterations of childbirth, that is the woman's battlefield, and child rearing was going to be a recurring theme throughout the series. I'm worried about this. I hope he means that we'll be exploring this in the broader sense of how women exercise soft power through their spheres of influence, and not just in relation to reproductive stuff. I don't need to be reminded that it's tough being a womb haver, that it's tough being a woman, that it's tough being perceived as a woman. And I don't want to watch a show about a bunch of people complaining about how hard it is to be part of those things and be those things. Like, I know. I don't think men need to be lectured on our behalf by a show either. Viserys installing Rhaenyra as cupbearer in his small council meetings shows that he did have ambitions for his daughter that extended beyond the standard Westerosi idea of what a princess should be. While it's not an outright endorsement of her succession, of course, it does speak to her intelligence and how his view of her competency, that he would allow a young woman and a literal child to serve as an audience to these very important meetings. His decision to name her as heir later then is not so shocking in light of this. After all, he had admonished his daughter for being late to the small council meeting, but at least Rhaenyra, unlike the king's own brother Damon, showed up at all. And I think for him, that's more important than anything sometimes. I love that King Viserys really is just like a guy. Like, he's just a guy that wants to party and celebrate being a dad. Even when it comes to his own brother, like, his ego means nothing when it comes to family. In some respects, this makes him a fantastic king. He understands what's at stake for the common man, and he keeps perspective. And even though Rhaenyra constantly laments that he's always wanted a son, Paddy Considine, the actor that plays King Viserys, injects every one of their interactions with this tenderness that only a father and daughter can share. Even when she is late to the meeting as cupbearer, when she hurries away from her father's embrace to go pour wine, the way he looks after her, like, it's pure proud dad energy. Like, you can't tell me otherwise. He's just a distracted, stressed working guy. But you can be that and make choices you regret because of that and still love your daughter, you know? Nobody is perfect, and honestly, it seems like Viserys is doing like a damn good job. But when it comes to being an absolute ruler, you need to be better than good. Damon doesn't do anything without being prompted first, but he will take it to 1,000 if you start with him, because he's just that bitch. It's fascinating to see how he toes the line between his aversion to authority and his reverence for his brother, the king, who he does love. But he's so extreme, like he can't do anything in half measures. And when you put someone like that in a position of authority, like as the head of the City Watch, that revolves around violence, you can only expect extreme violence. He wants to make his brother proud, so of course he's going to go at it 1,000 times harder than he probably would have even normally. And he's already going at that shit pretty hard. There's this shot where Lady Allison is retrieving her favor to give it to Damon at the tournament and looks away from her father, who is like very much stone cold, like no mercy, has no like pity for her or anything. She knows she doesn't have a choice in the matter, but it still pains her to do it because this guy did just name her brother after all. And then she has to turn back to her friend, the princess, who fully has her back to her in this shot. The princess is just reveling in Damon's power over this other person. The other person being her best friend's brother. And Lady Allison is just caught in the middle, resigned to her fate between these opposing forces, neither of which really care about her all that much. She's resigned to it, reluctant to perform it, but she does her duty. All right, that's all I got for you today. You can find all of my social media in the links below in the description box. Say hi, come chat. I look forward to hearing your thoughts, and I'll see you next week, guys, for another episode of A Mid-B on HoT. Later.